And just to refresh you on that big news break of the day, this is the direct fallout of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's attacks on India over 2 weeks ago. This is India's big signal to Canada and to the West at large. Remember, India had said it wants parity as far as diplomatic strengths of Canada and India are concerned. Canada's presence in the country was much larger, diplomatically speaking, than India's presence in Canada. And now Canada has bowed down to that Indian order and has flown out an unspecified number of its diplomats, we are told, to Singapore and Malaysia. So the surplus Canadian diplomats in India that was creating this discrepancy favoring Canada have all been removed. They've been evacuated and flown to Singapore and Malaysia, according to the Press Trust of India. We will also be independently bringing you more information on this big story in just a bit. But this is India refusing to budge on that demand for Canada to remove its diplomats. And remember, this comes a day after the Indian External Affairs Ministry said that there was a continuing interference by Canada in India's internal affairs. Very privileged to be joined now for his perspective on this unfolding story. 2 weeks after the Canadian Prime Minister triggered a huge diplomatic row between the two countries, a large number of Canadian diplomats have been flown out from India at India's orders. Joining me live now is Ambassador Kanwal Sibal. He's former Foreign Secretary of India. He's been ambassador to several different countries, including Russia, Turkey, and Egypt. Ambassador Sibal, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you joining me here on India today. My first question to you is on this immediate development, sir, on Canada flying out reportedly an unspecified number of its diplomats. This comes a day after, as you know, sir, the External Affairs Ministry said that there was a continuing interference in internal affairs and that India sought parity. Your assessment of today's development, sir?
Well, a couple of things. One is that, if you remember, our first reaction after Trudeau said what he said in the Canadian Parliament was to demand that Canada brings down the number of its diplomats and that there should be parity in the number of diplomats between the two countries, and that there was interference in our internal affairs by the Canadian mission in New Delhi. So it's not as if we have escalated in any way. We didn't give a time frame, nor have we given officially any time frame, but we have made it clear that we expect them to act on our request to pare down the number of diplomats in their country. Now, they have done that. The numbers are not very good. So I would say that under any normal diplomatic rules, if a host country asks a foreign embassy to reduce its personnel and gives the ground why it wants it to be done, then the other country has no choice. Therefore, it's not a question of they bowing down to an order. I mean, it's not an order in that sense. It is diplomatic practice, accepted, recognized diplomatic practice. The second thing, of course, is that in terms of parity in numbers, frankly, most of the big missions here or major countries have a huge number of diplomats, whereas we have a much smaller number of diplomats in those countries, which is a function, of the way our embassies are structured. We have much smaller embassies. We have much smaller number of diplomatic personnel. And then our interest in countries is not always commensurate with the interests other countries have in us. So there is no absolute rule about parity, but in this case, there was very good reason to ask for parity because number of their diplomats far exceeds the number of our diplomats, and importantly, there is not much else in the relationship. No, if there was a very wide-ranging relationship as we have with the United States, you could make out a case that there's a big disproportion in the number of U.S. diplomats here and our diplomats in the United States. But then the level of engagement and the breadth of engagement is huge. But in the case of Canada, trade is very little. Yes, there is investment by Canadian pension funds and this and that, but otherwise in terms of trade figures, they are very low. Other than our students going there and a lot of people from Punjab going to Canada, there's nothing much else in the relationship. So why should such a large number of diplomats in a country? But the related point is very important. It is standard practice of all countries.
Yes.
And they put in intelligence operatives in their consular wings. Because that is where the missions have a public interface regularly.
Yes. Absolutely. Ambassador, the flying out of these diplomats, you said that this is, diplomatic practice. When the host country, asks for it, it has to happen. I accept that. It comes a day also after the Indian government also said that there was a continued interference in internal affairs. How do you see that, sir? That's a pretty straight statement.
I was coming to come that, as I said, that it is standard diplomatic practice to post intelligence agents in your consular wings, because that is the wing which has direct public interface with the local public all the time. And people demand visas, people demand other forms of access to the country, and you can use that as a leverage to have people who will then do your work locally.
Yes.
Now, in this particular case, it's a racket that's going on. If what we are saying is true, and it is true, that there is human trafficking, there is drug trafficking, there is violence, there is crime, there is God knows what, and support to terrorism, then how do you relate this to the huge number of people who get visas from Punjab to go to Canada? There's a racket that is going on.
Yeah.
On the other side, the pro-Khalistani elements who have a say in government, because the NDP leader is suspected of having these links, and otherwise also the weight of numbers and the vote bank politics that operates there makes their influence quite important in various Canadian governance systems, and therefore there is a nexus, and therefore this has to be controlled. That the intelligence agencies who are operating from the Canadian consular wing, who then are facilitating the movement of these people to Canada, despite our request not to do so and keep control over these elements, and no evidence on their part that they want to do so, it becomes a matter of legitimate concern for us. And therefore, I think we were right to ask them to pare down their numbers. And I think the next step ought to be, if these things are not resolved amicably and the Canadian side still does not curb the activities of these people, and latest clips that I've seen seem to show that in this Gurdwara in Canada, the concerned Gurdwara, they're still putting up posters asking for the assassination of Indian diplomats and this and that. Now, if this carries on, I think we will have to close the Canadian consulate in Chandigarh and have the people come to Delhi for their visas, where police controls and other controls can be much more effective than in Chandigarh. So if we want to go to the root of the problem, unless, of course, the Canadians start playing ball, I don't know if they will, I think this will inevitably be the next step.
Do you think that could happen, sir? I mean, given everything that's happening in Canada right now, do you think India's stand would be enough to force that kind of action, that Canada might actually step back and take a re-look at its local domestic political policies as far as Khalistanis are concerned?
I don't think so. Because it's far too much embedded into the system. Remember, even Stephen Harper, who was Conservative Prime Minister, under whose leadership India and Canada relationship actually began to get normalized, to the point that even on the nuclear issue, we had a nuclear agreement with Canada.
Yeah.
And under his leadership, they put out a report in which there was a mention of Khalistani and extremist Sikh elements and all that. And they were forced to water it down because of the backlash through the Sikh community on the government. So even a conservative government, well-intentioned, even in terms of verbal changes in the report, was forced to bend to the pressure from these lobbies. Now, this man, Trudeau, is dependent for his prime ministership on these elements because he has a minority government. And they have penetrated the entire system, including the intelligence agencies. Now, I'm speculating. I have a feeling since they have penetrated into their intelligence agencies, this so-called intelligence that Trudeau is talking about is tampered evidence, is sort of evidence that has been invented in order to promote the case of the Khalistanis indirectly.
Yeah.
So system is so much poisoned by these elements that I can't see, for political reasons, vote bank reasons, his own survival, Trudeau taking any major steps. And unfortunately, from our point of view, he is also in some ways encouraged by his other partners who have problems because they can't really disown him and abandon him.
Indeed, yeah.
Or they are continuing to saying that, India must cooperate, and we expect the people who have done this to be brought to justice. There should be accountability and all those. Now, whether these kind of signals that he's getting will encourage him to step back, I don't know. And then the Canadian opposition is at him. The Canadian opposition...
Ambassador, which brings me to my next question. If it doesn't happen, and I agree with you, I don't think there's going to be a rethink at Canada's end, politically speaking. If that is the case, apart from shutting down the consulate, the Canadian consulate in Chandigarh, is there anything that India, in your view, can do to put the pressure? Because there is a public sense that strike while the iron is hot, and I submit that diplomacy is not a black and white issue. It's a constantly changing and unfolding issue between two countries. But is there anything else that can happen while global attention is on this issue?
I would advise against that. Point is that what we have done is severe enough, severe enough, and it'll hurt the Canadian side. It'll hurt us also because a lot of students and others, they want to go to Canada and everything will get slow. But there is the price that we have to pay in order to protect our larger security and national interests. Because if we don't do this, then this movement, which is now has a hub in Canada and is linked to what is happening in Australia even, and of course UK and the United States, then it can go out of hand. So some tough steps needed to be taken. However, we have now to wait to see what Canada does. If on their side they take some escalatory steps, then we can see what options we have. Otherwise, I think we should, on our side, limit ourselves to this action for the time being and continue to press them to act against these criminal gangs and these terrorists and the Khalistani elements in Canada, and press the Five Eye countries on this. One good thing in this is that a message has gone down very strongly to other countries who are also very lax in terms of curbing these elements.
Indeed.
That India will no longer support this kind of activity on their soil. All these countries, when it comes to signing UN documents or other documents on terrorism, G20, this and that, all will tell you that no country should give any support on its soil to terrorism, must curb terrorism, etc., etc. They sign that very blithely, but they don't act on the ground. Now, when there is a movement which is openly asking for the balkanization of India, which is working against the sovereignty and integrity of India, which is involved in violence in India. And all these people know the history of Punjab. They know also of Pakistani meddling in all this, and ISI meddling in all this. The intelligence agencies know that. So why don't the intelligence agencies act on this? Now there is a method in this madness on their part. They want to have a pressure point on India.
Yeah.
I'm afraid they're not going to give up that easily because the intelligence agencies in these countries have their own role to play.
Very interesting and extremely illuminating. Thank you, Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, for your time and your wisdom on this changing story. I agree with you. I don't think this is the last we've seen of it, but it is good to hear that your assessment is that India's steps so far have been severe enough. The ball in many ways is now in Canada's court, and we'll have to see what happens there. If they escalate, there may be more options, or will it go down a slightly more peaceful path compared to what the last 17 days have been. Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, thank you very much for speaking to India Today, sir.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So, remember that the Financial Times a few days ago had reported that 41 Canadian diplomats have been asked to leave India by the 10th of October. Now, today is the 6th of October, so 4 days before that deadline, using the flight route, diplomats have been put into flights and sent away from Delhi to, we are told, Kuala Lumpur, that's the capital of Malaysia, and to Singapore. A large number of these diplomats, we are told, there is no confirmation of it, are from the Chandigarh consulate of the Canadian government, which is where a large number of visas are granted to people from Punjab. So there are allegations of interference in internal affairs, human trafficking, drug trafficking, the support of gangs and terror, and all manner of very serious allegations that have been played to support this demand for these Canadian diplomats to be moved out of the country. But we're going to try and understand it a little bit more, because this is a fast, rapidly changing story. I'm joined now by Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar. He's a veteran diplomat, who's been in the External Affairs Ministry and several embassies across the world. Also joining me live are Gaurav Sawant, our managing editor. I'd like to start with our foreign affairs editor, Geeta Mohan, on this story. Geeta, we all saw that report in the Financial Times, which is when we first heard about, we'd known about the parity demand, but, the specific numbers, etc. Do we know anything more about how many diplomats have been moved out, where they're from, anything to do with the circumstances, Geeta?
Well, details not being shared by either side. I asked the Canadian side because all these information that's trickling in is coming from Ottawa. CTV News reported on the 41 diplomats now having been moved or are leaving India. We sought information from the Canadian High Commission. No comments from there. No confirmation yesterday from the Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson on the number and the deadline. So both sides quite mum. The fact is, Shiv, both sides are working privately. There are private conversations that are ongoing between India and Canada. Meanwhile, the fact that they've chosen to leave India and go to Singapore, not a far-off destination, a closer destination, in all probabilities, because conversations are ongoing between the two countries. And should there be a resolution, instead of coming all the way back from Canada, they can come back from Singapore. We do not know whether they completely packed their bags and left, or whether they've just left temporarily and are stationed in Singapore. So those details still awaited. But this, like Canada was saying, could impact their visa services, which certainly is going to be a concern for India. A lot of students last year missed or had to skip a year or wait a year because of the visa issues. We'll have to see how that really pans out. Having said that, India is quite determined that if there's interference in India's internal affairs, then India will continue to seek parity.
Okay, that parity, appears to have been achieved with these diplomats being flown out, but we don't know what that next step is. Ambassador Sajanhar, I'm coming to you in just a moment. Just wanted to get a quick word from our reporters. Gaurav is also with me. Gaurav, the diplomats have been flown out to nearby destinations, as Geeta said. What are you hearing from the government? Are talks happening? Are those private discussions that the Canadians wanted, are they happening right now?
So, Shiv, as Arindam Bagchi, the additional secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, also said that negotiations are on and diplomats always keep a channel of communication open. But there are two things which are extremely important. One, India is still waiting for evidence because all that's come from Canada were credible allegations of a potential link and no evidence. Point one. Point two, India is also unhappy about continued interference in India's internal affairs by Canada, and that is completely unacceptable. It's not as if it stopped, it's not as if it was restricted just to the farmers' agitation or a couple of events in India, but it's continued interference in India's internal affairs. As the former Foreign Secretary Kanwal Sibal explained, the moment people go seeking visas, that is where the interface happens, and that is where, you get people to start working for you, and then Canada starts interfering, is the assessment, and that's just one of the assessments. So will a consulate have to be shut down? Anyway, Canada has an additional consulate in India compared to India in Canada. They have one in Bengaluru, they have one in Mumbai and one in Chandigarh. India just has, and plus the High Commission in Delhi, India just has Ottawa, Toronto and Vancouver. So will numbers be scaled down, especially when criminals, terrorists and criminal supporters manage to get visas and operate from overseas? So India has a dossier ready which will be shared again should there be a need with Canada. Multiple dossiers have been shared with Canada on inaction against terrorists and overground workers of terrorist organizations and criminal gangs that have been involved in extortion, money laundering and hawala. So all of it, India wants Canada to check and nip this before it escalates, Shiv.
Okay, Gaurav and Geeta, thank you very much for the moment. I'm going to bring Ambassador Sajjanhar in on this to help us understand, and help us process these very rapid developments over the last few years. Ambassador Sajjanhar, the Indian government, by saying continued interference in internal affairs of the country, that appears to set the stage for, only possible escalations from here on, or are we wrong to read it like that? Diplomats being flown out, India, sort of drawing the line in the sand. What next, sir, in your view?
No, I think this is messaging that we have been signaling, that we have been giving out to Canada, and I think the message has gone out to them. I think right from the word go, when we first described what Justin Trudeau had said as absurd and motivated, politically motivated because they're political compulsions, then you would recall that we had also stopped issuance of visas or any consular facilities from our high commissions and consulate generals in Canada for all Canadian citizens. It had been done, and then now more recently it is across the world, no facilities, no service to Canadian citizens. And now we have had this third aspect. Of course, it had been mentioned earlier that we want parity in numbers as also in terms of rank equivalence. I think that is where the matter rests. I don't think India at this moment would be, ready to take any further steps or any further action. We'll really have to wait and see how Canada responds. I agree with Gaurav, what he has said. We are waiting for evidence. And then I think we are also waiting for action to be taken by the Canadian law enforcement authorities against the Khalistani elements in Canada. And I think there have been a few
But Ambassador Sajjanhar,
that...
what happens if action is not taken against those Khalistanis? I mean, after all, this is a domestic vote bank issue in Canada. Elections are looming on Mr. Trudeau as well. It doesn't seem like action will be taken against the Khalistanis. So what then?
Yeah, it will not be... yes, you're right, Shiv. I don't think it will be taken because India wants it. Because India demands it. I think it will start happening if it starts hurting the Canadians themselves. And, there have been some reports yesterday that there were 8 Khalistani, extremists and separatists and, those engaged in organized crime. They were arrested and they had a huge cache of arms. So, this is exactly what we have also been telling Canada. That it is not only against India, it's going to hurt you. They need to also keep in mind what Hillary Clinton had said. If you are going to have snakes in your backyard, they are not going to hurt only your neighbor, but they'll come to bite you also. And I think that seems to be happening, if there is this organized crime and they, engage themselves in such illegal and unlawful activities, then of course Canada will be forced to take action, not because India has been asking them, but because, law and order is adversely impacted in their own country. Chef.
In your view, last couple of questions, Ambassador, in your view, has Canada or the West at large in some ways underestimated India's resolve as far as this action is concerned? Because over 15 days, it seemed like, Justin Trudeau was continuing to very confidently, publicly posture against India. And towards the end, it seemed like he had to eat a bit of humble pie and then, request private talks. Has this been a learning experience in your view, sir, for the West and for Canada particularly?
I would think so. I think both for Canada and I would imagine the United States, because the US also in some way would have been engaged in nudging, if not actively encouraging Canada to take up this issue and raise it in such a manner.
Yeah.
But possibly they did not realize that India would respond so very robustly and so very firmly. And not only in terms of rejecting the charges that were rejected right on the first day when this charge was made in the Canadian Parliament, but also stopping visa facilities, visa services to the Canadians, and now asking also for reduction in the strength of the Canadian embassy, High Commission and the consulates, both in rank as well as parity in numbers.
My final question to you.
I think they miscalculated. They thought that India would be much more willing to listen and to engage. But India has been very clear right from the very beginning that these credible allegations don't fly. If you have evidence, come out with it. And so far, they have not come out with anything of substance, nothing relevant, nothing specific has been brought to our attention.
One final question, and this is a big picture question, Ambassador Sajjanar, which is that has this entire episode, of course it's not over, we're still reporting it, but has this episode so far also reflected India's rise in some way? Because it is clear now to a global audience that all of these powerful Anglosphere countries have these policies towards Khalistanis because we are told they also want leverage against India because they are also keeping tabs on India's rise. They recognize India's potential. They recognize India's power, in a new and changing international order. And these countries, which profess to be strategic partners of India, also want that kind of leverage against India, sir. That's an affirmation of India's own rise.
No, absolutely. Meaning as it is said, and meaning not exactly. I want it to be understood that way, that no one kicks a dead dog. If a dog is smart, healthy, and is able to take care, then only people will come after it. And that's what after the G20, what we observed, India's with the G20 consensus declaration, with AU becoming a member of the G20, with the India Middle East European Economic Corridor, and so many other things happening, and India's economy doing exceedingly well. So I think by and large there has been this messaging that India has arrived on the global scene, and that is why maybe the United States and some of the other countries thought that it would be advisable to, in some way or the other, cut India, well, not exactly to size, but just clip its wings a wee bit. And they possibly didn't realize that India's response is going to be so muscular. So definitely, I think India will have to continue to strengthen its partnership because they also realize that they need India. And, no solution to any of the challenges in the world, whether it is climate change, it is peace, security, it is terrorism, it is rise of China, nothing can be possible. You cannot get any resolution, any solution without engagement, without involvement of India.
Ambassador Sajjanar, always a pleasure listening to you and help us, decode this unfolding story. So I thank you for your time and thank you for being with me once again here on India Today. We've got, in fact, some breaking news coming in. And from the actions being taken in India to what's happening back in Canada pertaining to where this entire crisis actually began, local media reports are exposing the Canadian government in a very, very big way and going viral. A local Sikh leader of some influence has nailed the truth about Hardeep Singh Nijjar that India has been talking about and Canada has refused to see. His name is Andy Sandhu. He is the leader of a Gurudwara in British Columbia who has given an interview that has set the cat among the pigeons in the Canadian press. He says that Hardeep Nijjar, who he had met a few weeks before his death, had organized extremist training camps. This one statement from Andy Sandhu, who is the man you see on the right side of your screen, has added a massive glare on Canadian intelligence, considering that Canadian intelligence was in touch with Nijjar almost every week, according to the dead terrorist's son. This is a big, big embarrassment for the Trudeau government. Here's what Canadian journalist Daniel Boardman had to say about this on his social media handles.
So we have a new report coming out in Canada, one that I think is important enough to do a video at 1 a.m. about, and it will change the geopolitical game between India and Canada completely, if true. So we have a Sikh leader from the Okanagan Sikh temple, which is near Surrey, BC, the place Hardeep Singh Nijjar had his temple, and he spoke to reporters claiming that after he got back from meeting with other Sikh leaders, it was common knowledge among the community, he's alleging, that Hardeep Singh Nijjar was running weapons training and essentially extremist training camps to attack India. Now, the reason why this is so important is because not that India didn't know this. I mean, India has said he's a member of the Khalistan Tiger Force. That's a listed terrorist organization in their country. And to them, he's a terrorist, and they took out a terrorist, or a terrorist died, or they've been accused of something, whatever the position may be. However, if all this evidence we have on Hardeep Singh Nijjar checks out, it won't matter if we have the Indian government on the phone admitting to this at all, because of international norms. So let's kind of explain. There's only one. International law is silly. No one follows it. There's only one law in international geopolitics. It's might makes right. And then underneath that, there's all these different, let's say, global norms, societal norms, geopolitical norms. What are they? They're nebulous. And that's kind of the point. But the reason why you can't take out someone on Canadian soil is because Canada's a functioning country, part of the G7, Five Eyes, blah, 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 blah. And the reason why you can take out like Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen or Osama bin Laden in Pakistan is because they're not really functioning states. That's the international norm.
So Daniel Boardman is a very popular Canadian journalist, and he represents some of the sudden heat that Justin Trudeau is facing from the local press finally in Canada over this exploding issue. But that's not the only place that the Canadian Prime Minister is facing heat from. He's getting it from his own citizens as well. And I wanted to show you this video clip that's been going viral since yesterday because it is representative of how Justin Trudeau appears to be viewed by citizens on issues other than the India-Canada crisis, because there are many that have piled onto him. Here's a video of him being shamed on his own turf. Trudeau being confronted by a man in Toronto while he was greeting his supporters. He was snubbed and abused incessantly. In this video that's been viral, Trudeau is seen waving and shaking hands with a supporter, but a local man refuses, and this is what he said about one of the issues on which the Trudeau government is being pummeled in Canada, and that's the housing crisis. Listen in.
Hi, pleasure to see you as well. Hey there, how you doing?
I'm not shaking your hand, bro. You're a piece of shit, man.
Why is that, sir?
You up the entire country. You got our buddy over there.
Yeah, but how did I mess up this country?
Can anybody afford a home? In this day, they're charging people carbon tax. You got 9 V8s here idling for 30 minutes. Your carbon footprint is increasing. We're getting charged for what?
You know what we're doing?
It's not stopping.
We're putting a price on pollution,
right?
And we're returning it to families like yours.
I don't think so. You're sending it over to Ukraine, right?
No.
Yeah. You send it over to the guy that you were with that slaughtered his own country.
You've been listening to Putin, have you?
Putin? No. We definitely don't listen to your propaganda, eh? You got propaganda, bro. Piece of shit, man.
Meanwhile, the attacks on Trudeau from inside Canada, outside Canada, well-known foes also continues. Of course, there's Vladimir Putin as well, who's recently been praising India, piling it on Justin Trudeau. Vladimir Putin has lashed out at Trudeau, calling him, quote, an idiot. Putin further added that Trudeau lacks basic knowledge about World War II and seems to have never gone to school. Well, these are visceral words in a relationship that is completely beyond repair. And it comes, remember, just a few days after Justin Trudeau gave a standing ovation to a Nazi standing right next to, well, Vladimir Putin's arch enemy in this world, Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine. Take a look.
Допустим, он этого не знает. Let's say he does not know that. In no way do I want to hurt the feelings of the people of Canada. Despite everything, we treat Canada with respect, especially its people. But if he does not know that during World War II it was Hitler and his minions who fought against Russians, then he's an idiot. That means he did not study in school and has no elementary knowledge. But if he knows that this person fought on Hitler's side and calls him a hero of Ukraine and a hero of Canada, then he's a It's one way or another.
And bringing you some terrific breaking news now here on India Today. India's Asian Games gold rush in Guangzhou, China continues. The Indian men's hockey team has won the gold medal at the Asian Games, beating Japan 5-1 and also qualified now for the Paris Olympics. India's gold rush at the Guangzhou Asian Games is continuing. The Indian men's hockey team wins gold and qualifies for the 2024 Paris Olympics. Big news coming in from China. The election dates for the upcoming elections in 5 big states are all set to be announced in the next couple of days as the battle for the 2024 Lok Sabha election picks up speed. The dates for the big assembly elections in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Telangana and Mizoram are all set to be announced any time now between October the 8th and 10th. So by Monday, the Election Commission will be announcing the election dates. That's what India Today broke earlier today. Polling is likely to be held between the second week of November and the first week of December this year in those 5 states. What our political bureau hears is that Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Mizoram and Telangana may vote in a single phase like the last time in 2018, but Chhattisgarh polling is likely to take place in 2 phases, also similar to what happened in 2018. Now, just to keep you completely ahead, I want to bring you down to some data and number crunching. Remember, India Today and CVoter have been tracking the poll pulse across the key battleground states that are going to the elections. First up, Rajasthan. Let me just show you that data so you know where the number crunching is at. The India Today CVoter is projecting a 41% vote share for the Congress. That's at a 2% gain from 2018. The BJP is projected to get 46% of votes. That's a gain of 7% in Rajasthan. Let's move on to the seat share. India Today's CVoter is projecting 83 seats for the Congress. That's down 17 from its 2018 tally of 100 in Rajasthan. The BJP is projected to get 114 seats, a gain of 41 seats from 2018's 73 seats. So that's where the BJP has the advantage in Rajasthan. Now, who do the voters of Rajasthan prefer as their chief minister? Ashok Gehlot still at the top with 35% respondents voting for him. 25% respondents prefer Vasundhara Raje and 19% want Congress rebel leader Sachin Pilot. Now let's move on to the other big state, the neighbouring Madhya Pradesh. Here the India Today CVoter poll projects that the BJP and Congress are neck and neck. Both the parties are projected to get 44% vote share each. It's tantalizing. In terms of seat projections here, the battle is again very close. The Congress projected to get 114, the BJP 112. Is it going to be a long day on counting day? We'll have to wait and see. Even the contest between the two chief ministerial contenders is a tight one. 37% respondents chose BJP's Shivraj Chauhan, who's the incumbent CM, while 36% voted for the Congress's claimant Kamal Nath. Now let's take a look at the data for the Chhattisgarh. The Congress is in power there. It's expected to gain 3% more, projected to bag 46% vote share. The BJP gaining 8%, projected to get 41% of the votes. So the Congress incumbent has the advantage. In terms of seat share in that state, India Today CVoter projects 51 seats for the Congress, down 17 from 2018. 38 for the BJP, up 23 from 2018. The gain from the BJP is most likely coming from Ajit Jogi's party, but still the Congress in the driving seat. In the state of Chhattisgarh, incumbent Chief Minister Bhupesh Baghel's popularity is unmatched. 49% prefer him as Chief Minister. 24% voted for the BJP's Chief Minister, who was earlier Chief Minister Raman Singh. T.S. Singh Deo, who is the Deputy CM, is third in the popularity index with 13%. So those are the numbers. The election dates are likely to be announced anytime. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, one of those 3 days, it's all going to be announced. And India's #1 political team right here on India Today will, of course, bring that to you first right here on your favorite channel. That's a wrap on 5 Live. Thanks so much for watching.